What's up, y'all? My name is Kodak Zach. I'm a variety streamer on Twitch as well as a competitive Pokemon player. I've been playing competitive Pokemon for years now. I started with singles in Generation 6, X and Y, transitioned over to VGC in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and I've been loving that position ever since. One of my big passions, as well as something that I try to do a lot on Twitch, is bring Pokemon to new people who maybe haven't gotten to experience the competitive side of Pokemon before. And so our goal with that was to bring a bunch of content creators together and have a draft league, both of people who have experience with Pokemon and some who do not have any experience with Pokemon, and let them kind of learn and experience in a more controlled environment, right? I think we've got some really interesting teams. We've got some great personalities who are going to put some great stuff together, and I'm really excited to share it with you guys. So if that's something that you're interested in, that's something you want to see more of, this is going to be a weekly thing as I recap what happened over the course of the week and where we went. So if that sounds good to you, if that sounds interesting, you know, I'll chill. I'll be a YouTuber. Like, subscribe, you know, do all the fun things that they tell you to do. Comment. I don't know what else you're supposed to do, but all those things, do them. Have fun with it. As for the format that we're going with, we're playing in the VGC 2022 format, which has 2 restricteds. So you'll get 2 box legendaries, as well as we're using a premium Pokemon format where you get 2 premium Pokemon. These Pokemon were deemed to be either somehow stronger or more used, or have some kind of advantage that made them a step above kind of a standard Pokemon, right? They did something above and beyond what the normal Pokemon would, and that put them in like a class above. That also gave us the opportunity to have more varied Pokemon, more different strategies, and hopefully some exciting stuff. So if that sounds like fun to you, hang out and let's break down some of the teams. Starting first and foremost with my own team, the Gemstone Gamers. When I was picking, I didn't have a solid plan in mind going in. The only thing that I knew was I was going to take my mascot, my favorite Pokemon ever, and my son, essentially, Sableye. And that would be my counter to both weather options as well as speed options, right? But I lucked into getting a really solid pair of restricteds as far as Yveltal and Solgaleo. I think they complement each other well. Solgaleo loves to Dynamax, weakness policy, and just tear through, whereas Yveltal can max if need be, but can also be more of a supportive restricted, do a lot of varied things. I took Entei and Whimsicott as my premiums. Whimsicott gives you speed control, it gives you fake tears to power up your special attackers, it gives you encore, pretty much whatever kind of support you need. And Entei, I feel, pairs really well with Solgaleo, can run Scarf, can run Bulldoze to proc your own policies, it can run Sacred Fire to help against things like Zacian, and it does all kinds of other stuff. As far as our standard Pokemon go, with Sableye, I have weather options, I have Sun and I have Rain, so I made sure to grab both a Rain user and a Sun user. I brought Cherim as our Sun user, and Seismitoad as our Rain user, giving us a little bit of weather options regardless of the weather. I also got Shedinja, a good endgame kind of Pokemon, something that you can play around or build around to finish the game with Shedinja and win. Also has some interesting support options with things like Will-O-Wisp and Ally Switch and the like. Togekiss has great redirection, really strong support, isn't something that you can just ignore on the field, but also can protect some of your frailer mons from getting big hits. Torracat, Incineroar is the best in the format, so I don't know that I was ever going to be able to get something like that, but Torracat is a good substitute, replacement, whatever you might like to call it. With Eviolite, it gains a similar amount of bulk, and it trades some of Incineroar's power for a little bit of extra speed. Raichu is really good next to Yveltal especially, but does well against a lot of things. Lightning Rod can keep Yveltal safe from electric types attacks, Lecky in general. It also has good support with Fake Out and Nuzzle and Electro Web to help give me speed control. And then finally, my last pick was the big man himself, Stonjourner. I'm really excited to try to use him in a couple of teams. I don't think Stonjourner is a necessarily good Pokemon, but it has a very good ability and power spot that could help boost the Maxmon that I put it next to, be it Solgaleo, be it Yveltal, be it even like Seismitoad or Cherim, depending on the situation, right? So I feel like as a whole, I was really happy with how this draft turned out. I gave myself an A, nice little pat on the back, right? I think I got very solid out of it. My biggest concern comes from, I think my back line is a little bit weaker. I'm top heavy. Yveltal, Solgaleo, Whimsicott, and Entei are all very strong, very well-respected Pokemon, but kind of after that, the quality of my Pokemon starts to fall off a little bit. I didn't get quite as strong of standard Pokemon, I think, to fill out the rest of the team. So it's going to be a situation where I might have to rely more heavily on my restricteds than some of the other teams because I don't have as strong of Pokemon in the back. So that would be my one thing. I would probably give myself an A- if we're being honest, but semantics. On to the next, we have No Shame in Losing, which is owned by Katsup, another streamer friend of ours. If you're looking for the best team in the league, this is it. There's no way around it. There is no reason that we should have let her get both of these together. But Zacian and Groudon is one of the best combinations in the game right now. It hits like a train. It covers for each other's weaknesses well. It does whatever you need it to do. It gives you weather control for Sun, which thank goodness she didn't get Venusaur as well, because it might have been all over if that was the case. But her two premiums fit well in the team as well, with Thundurus giving her options as far as Defiant or Prankster. Defiant to help ward off Intimidate, and Prankster to help set up different weather options or set up Paralysis, Scary Face, etc., right? Whereas Charizard, pure damage, comes in with the Sun and can sweep your team if you're not ready for it. Wildfire is extremely powerful. Airstream gives it speed control, and it can very easily run away with games. This top four is something you could take on the VGC ladder right now today and probably get yourself to Master Ball tier right away. So it's a scary combination, and it doesn't get better from there. The standards give more support option. Gothitelle with trapping, counter Trick Room options, Fake Out. You have Jellicent, which helps against physical attackers, can burn, can strength sap, is very bulky. You have Cradily, which gives you options against water with Storm Drain, which would otherwise be one of your biggest weaknesses. Lilligant, which has speed control because of the Sun and can do sleep, can do other support options as well. And Landorus, which just hits like a train. So, I mean, top to bottom, I think this is the best team in the entire league, and this is the one that people are going to have to really prep for and be aware of going into their fights. So, good God, help us all against this one. On to the next. We go with a little bit of a blast from the past with the beatdown boomers. Snooze, who owns this team, went with a classic feel, lived up to his name, and went with something you might see in, I don't know, Gen 5, maybe a Gen 6 meta, with a couple extra added twists in there. Snooze did not feel the need to get himself a premium Pokemon. He didn't vibe with any of them, so he just went with standard Pokemon instead. So he has his 2 restricteds of Dialga and Giratina. Dialga is a very, very scary Pokemon. Can do Trick Room, can do Weakness Policy, can do Max. It can do pretty much whatever you need from it in a set. Does well into a lot of other major restricteds. Definitely a very, very scary mon to deal with. And Giratina, well, I don't personally know what it does. It's got bulk, it's got, I don't know, something, probably, presumably. He picked it for a reason. But to me, this team is the opposite of my team. While it doesn't have the top end strength that some of the other teams have, the depth throughout really helps. Rotom Heat is a very, very solid option. Snorlax can be very difficult to counter if you don't have the appropriate measures. Politoed and Ludicolo give you a nice weather core in the event that you need to have speed or counter weather. Hitmontop with Fake Out and Intimidate and a strong support cast. I think it gets coaching as well. Braviary to ward off opposing Intimidators. Cresselia as a bulky support mon. Nihilego can max, can kind of run away with a game if given proper speed control. And Comfey as a support mon can heal, can ally switch, I think it can set terrain as well. Like it can do a myriad of things depending on what's needed for the team. So I think from the back end is where Snooze really gets the support, and that's why I gave him an A as well. Is I think his top 2, well, maybe not as immediately threatening as some of the other teams. He has the back line that really supports it well, and I feel like he made a team that really meshes well with each other and gives him a lot of options depending on what the opponent does, right? Next we go to MadBro. MadBro I gave a B just because I worry about the restricteds. I think his team is very solid. I think he has some very good cores in place. He has Sun with Ninetales and Leafeon. He has 2 different Aura Veil setters with Max Lapras or Ninetales. He has 2 of the scariest premiums in the league in Landorus T and Urshifu Single Strike. But I get concern when it comes to both the redundant weaknesses and the power output of the 2 restricteds, and that's the only thing that makes me hesitant to believe in this team. Who knows? He could surprise me. MadBro is a experienced player, but the top end restricteds concern me because I don't think they go pound for pound with a lot of the other restricteds in the league, which could cause them to fall behind, right? Lunala is great. Shadow Shield is a really solid ability, something that you need to account for, but in a Dynamax format, it doesn't want to be the Dynamax mon. It doesn't want to take on the offensive presence as much. And Mewtwo, while it can Dynamax, is still fairly frail in Dynamax, doesn't quite hit hard enough to warrant not setting it up beforehand, and it usually can't survive long enough to set up in a doubles match. But with double Aura Veil and with Intimidate, there stands to reason that Mewtwo could get the bulk that it needs to set up and could be a terror given the right support. So I'm not going to write it off just yet. I'd like to see more of it. But just on first impression, look through of each of the teams, I think it's a little bit weaker than the 3 that we've seen before it. But still has plenty of options that can take the entire league if need be. Ryrie, a first-time player, a very new player. If you've seen some of my other videos, he was with me when I taught competitive Pokemon, someone who is still trying to learn. I think Ryrie runs into a similar problem that I have, of he's very top heavy. Calyrex Ghost is a monster of a restricted. It hits like a train. It's very fast, but it's very frail. It's the epitome of a glass cannon. Ho-Oh is the opposite. It's a lot bulkier. It has Regenerator, so it can bring itself out and bring itself back in. It still hits quite hard, especially if you give it like Choice Band or other, Life Orb, etc. So it gives you kind of the dichotomy of options that helps with your restricteds. Both of them can max, neither of them needs to max, which opens the door for some of the other Pokemon. Incineroar, we already talked about him earlier. One of the best, if not the best Pokemon in competitive VGC since its release. It's never been in a format where it's not top 2. So it's terrifying. It gives Fake Out support, it gives Intimidate support, it gives Parting Shot. Flare Blitz does a lot of damage from it. It can do Lariat, it can do Throat Chop, it can do Taunt, it can do... you could open up 8 move slots on Incineroar and it would still have things that it would be having to leave on the bench. Which is a really scary Pokemon. And then finally, Ditto, as his last premium, is a very, very scary Pokemon in a 2 restricted formats because it can essentially give the opponent one of your restricteds. If played well, it comes in and immediately becomes whatever is straight across from it. Meaning, if you have Zacian across it, then your opponent now has a Zacian. And that's what you have to deal with. So planning around Ditto, you almost have to plan to counter yourself in a way, which makes it hard. The back end, though, Metagross is very solid, gives you an option similar to Solgaleo as a Maxmon, though a little bit weaker. Garchomp gives you really strong ground type option, which is really good against a lot of the things in this format, against certain teams in particular. Corviknight has fallen off a lot in the last number of seasons because of the emergence of Regieleki, but Mirror Armor is a very good ability, protects some of your Pokemon that are more susceptible to either Intimidates or other stat drops. By reflecting it onto the opponent. Conkeldurr can be a good option if you get stuck in Trick Room, because I don't think this team deals with Trick Room very well. So Conkeldurr does really well into that, has very solid options and does solid damage. Luxray has options to be an Intimidator as well if they need a second one, or can be Guts, can do damage output. Gastro is a very solid redirector. Gets Storm Drain as well, so it can suck up all the water. It can take away anything that's giving you trouble on that side. And Tapu Koko is a very solid electric type to help deal with some of the water or the flying types that can give issues, such as Yveltal or Kyogre. So I think the team as a whole is solid, but it's definitely top heavy, leaning very heavily on the restricteds and premiums, and has a lot of room to fall back if the standards can't pull their weight, right? Next we move on to the Los Angeles Chargebugs. Wyatt put together a team that I don't know that it's the pound for pound strongest team in the league, but I'm very, very excited to see what happens with it, what he does with it, because it has so many interesting options on it, and that's why I gave it an A. He has very strong Trick Room options with Calyrex Ice and Stakataka and Dusclops and even Shuckle and Amoonguss. Rillaboom does very well in Trick Room as well. Malamar can cause havoc, so he has very, very strong Trick Room options on a league that doesn't have a lot of Trick Room, which I think can be a big benefit. If there's not a lot available, that means he has more options, but he also doesn't have to go Trick Room because he has Pheromosa, which can do Speed Swap, get Calyrex or one of his others flying. He also has Tailwind using Talonflame. He has Dracovish, which is a very scary speed option. He has Tyranitar, which can give him defensive weather against some of the other weathers in the format, as well as give him Sand for if he were to choose to run Sand Rush Dracovish, or to buff the special defense of things like Stakataka and obviously Tyranitar itself. All that to be said, doesn't even mention the Pokemon that was formerly one of the menaces of VGC prior to this meta of Xerneas, a very powerful, very strong Pokemon. The caveat being it takes one turn of setup every time to Geomancy. It doesn't have a lot of flexibility in what it does, but what it does very well. So you have to account for that, and you have to be prepared for that no matter what your enemy is. The only concern that I have personally for Wyatt's team is it's very susceptible to both Taunt and Intimidate. Because you don't want to see Rillaboom, you don't want to see Calyrex, you don't want to see Dracovish, you don't want to see Tyranitar, Pheromosa, or Stakataka get intimidated. Malamar is a good way to deter that because of the contrary ability. Taunt also throws off a lot of his Trick Room options. It throws off a lot of his, tricky Speed Swap or, Amoonguss shenanigans. It also stops Geomancy from going up, which really hampers Xerneas' ability. So I think Taunt is something that he's very susceptible to and has to play around well, but assuming he can pull it off and manage it, then he has a team that has so many options that the opponent has to prepare for that it's going to be a nightmare to team build against. And even if he doesn't bring a gimmick a certain week, he still has a very strong core that can just outright win games. So I gave that an A. I think that's one of the most solid teams all around in the rest of the league. Lycithia's team is the only team that I gave a C to, and the only reason that I gave it a C is because it has some issues with coherency. I think there's very strong modes in it, but I think this is the team that would probably benefit the most from some mid-season moves, changing out some of your possible Pokemon for different ones. But who knows? I could be surprised. I could see something new that wasn't something that I expected. Her restricteds, Kyurem White is a tactical nuke, hits like a train, very, very strong, lacks a little bit in speed, but they can make up for it between either Regieleki or Mimikyu using Trick Room. Meanwhile, Zygarde is a bit of a setup. It requires a little bit of work to play around, but once it gets going, once it's able to get a coil or two off and start popping either 1,000 arrows or maxing in its stronger form, it can tear through teams at a alarming rate. So you have to be very aware of that and very cognizant of that. You also have Regigigas Weezing, which is a very, very powerful combination, has been used in a lot of formats recently. It forces the respect, even if it's never brought. She forced the respect to have both of those Pokemon on the team. You have to team build around that, and you have to be prepared for if that comes, because that can just nuke you. Regigigas is very, very strong when paired with Weezing. Weezing gives it the ability to remove its slow start and just hit the ground running, which is a very, very scary thing. Weezing can also be used independently to remove abilities that might be hindering to you. It can take away things like the Drought or Drizzle, which give weather. It can take away like Clear Body on like Metagross or Solgaleo to let you debuff them in different ways. It can take away any ability that gives you trouble, but it also takes away your own ability, which is where I feel like it can give some of the Pokemon in Lycithia's team trouble as well, because she has Pokemon similar to the opponent that would get hampered by not having their ability, such as Regieleki gets a heavy damage reduction because of it. Mimikyu loses its Disguise. Zygarde loses its Transformation if Weezing is on the field. So it clashes a little bit with some of the other things, but it has options that are very, very strong and very, very scary. She also has Colossal, which is a menace of a Pokemon, but requires setup. Either something like a Suicune that could hit with a water move, or I believe Obstagoon gets Surf, is something I found out recently. So a lot of different options, a lot of ways that you can set up Colossal and have it be a sweep threat right out the gate. So while it's the only C of the league, I do think it has a lot of very solid options. I think it has a lot of things that it can do very well, and I'm very curious to see how the build reflects that, right? Because I think there's a lot of options that you have, be it Trick Room, be it Speed Control with Alecki or Tailwind from Suicune. You have the options in place to be able to really run away with games. It's one of those, like, it requires a little bit of finesse, it requires a little bit of setup, but if you pull it off, you can steamroll. So I'm very excited to see what it does. I just think in this league, it's a little bit weaker because the setup is a little bit harder. So I'd like to see maybe in action a little bit more before I make a final call on it. And then finally, our last team is Ash's team. It's a rain team. It's a scary one, and I think there's some pieces that feel out of place, but as a whole, it's a very scary operation and something that I'm definitely not looking forward to having to team build for. Kyogre is one of the strongest Pokemon in the format. Sets its own rain. Water Spout can just devastate if you let it get speed control. It's a nightmare to fight against. It gets good natural bulk, so it can live different hits. It can return those hits in kind heavily, and it does a lot of things very, very well. Palkia, well, not the preferred partner, probably the best one that you could have gotten on this list. It does very well in the rain itself. It gives you Trick Room options if you feel that you can't get speed control in front of an opponent. It gives you very, very strong options, and it gives you a Maxmon that can max in rain that's a little bit more comfortable doing so than Kyogre is. So it's a very scary combination, and it pairs well with what you have. Grimmsnarl is absurd, to say the least, in the premium category. He can set screens, he can set tricks, he can do scary faces to give you speed control, he can do paralysis, he can do damage. He's quite strong, even with little attack investment. Things like Spirit Break, Sucker Punch, Throat Chop, etc. can really change the game, and he's very much something you have to respect and play around every single week. And I think plays very well with this set because it helps you get speed control if you need it on Kyogre, it helps you get bulk if you need it on Palkia, it helps you just be... That trio is a very scary core. The other premium I don't understand as much, Venusaur. I'm thankful, in essence, that Venusaur did not get picked up by Cat to go into the Sun team, but it doesn't mesh as well in the Rain team as some of the other grass types that could have been available, like Kartana or Ferrothorn. I think it does very well in a vacuum, but it doesn't carry the team quite as well as something like that would. But it also doesn't have to max. It could be a supportive Mon, it could sleep, it could do other things like that. So I'm curious to see how it's used, I'm curious to see what it's done with, but I don't know about the fit with that. As far as the standard Mons, Volcarona, I really like its fit in this team. It gives you redirection options. it resists all 3 standard moves on Zacian, which is really helpful. Even though it doesn't have great physical bulk, it can take, I believe, a hit from all 3 of its normal attacks, which is a huge deal when it comes to playing it next to like a Palkia or a Grimmsnarl, right? It can really help slow down some of those scarier Pokemon and force you to not be targeting heavily on the big damage dealers. Milotic, I think, is really good. There's a lot of Intimidate going around. You can do things like Coil and Hypnosis. You can do things like Adrenaline Orb. So once it gets intimidated, it takes off and can really just be a sweeper in the rain. So it has a lot of good options. Crobat gives you Tailwind support, can help you with speed control, can also do, I think it gets like Mean Look to lock in opposing weather setters, so you can control the weather. It can be a really solid support mon. Mamoswine does well in the rain as well. It can do damage, it can do support, it can pretty much do whatever you need from it. Raikou gives you a good electric type option to make sure that you have everything you need. And Lele is an interesting option as far as like a Scarf user. If you're not playing it on Kyogre, it can be very, very strong in Psychic terrain, going very fast with things like Moonblast, Psyshock, Psychic, etc. So I think it's a solid all-around team. Has a couple of weird like fit issues, but I could be wrong about that, and I could not see something that they do, and we'll have to wait and see. But that's all we have. Those are our teams. Next week, we will be over the course of this week, rather, we will be doing our battles. So I will be doing at the end of the week for next week, I will have a recap of all those battles. I'll be talking about the team that I made, the team that I built, and any other teams that I contributed, have insight on, whatever it might be. And I'll also be going over the battles for any of the replays that I'm able to get my hands on for my own battles or the other ones across the league. So if that's something you're interested in, if that's something you want to see more of, again, drop a sub, do the, YouTube, blah, 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 whatever. Let me shill for a while. And also, come check me out on Twitch. I'm live 3 to 4 nights a week. We do all kinds of stuff over there, a lot of Pokemon content. We're going to be doing a lot more Pokemon content as I gear up for both this and for regionals coming up very soon. So if that's something that you're interested in, come say hello. Until then, I will see you all next week with the first week of results and our teams that we've built. So have a good one. Bye-bye.